Amateur Traveler is in its 20th year now, but can you imagine if I had people on the show who had never been to the destination but had just read about it or seen a movie about it? That wouldn't make any sense at all, and you wouldn't listen. We all know how important it is to receive advice from people who know a destination to get the most authentic local experience. And a great option for experiencing this is Explore Worldwide and their authentic small group adventures, led by local tour leaders, perfect for solo travelers who want to meet like minded people with a desire for adventure. I'm often an independent traveler, but two of my last three trips were with small group tours because they organize everything and it's a lot easier. If you want to recreate the tour I did to Malta, they have a Malta and Gozo Discovery Tour. I'm intrigued by one of their tours called A Taste of Sicily. The company again is Explore Worldwide, and visit exploreworldwide.com to learn more. And thanks to Explore Worldwide for sponsoring this episode of Amateur Traveler. The nights are long, the days are short, and the weather is chilly to downright cold, depending on where you are. It's a good time to slip into a Quince iconic Mongolian cashmere sweaters, which start at only $50. You can treat yourself to everyday luxury at an affordable price with Quince. If you really want to dive into luxury, you can check out their leather handbags, washable silk shirts, and European linen sheet sets. Whatever you're looking for at Quince, all the prices are 50 to 80% less than similar brands, and they do that by partnering directly with top factories and cutting out the middleman. They only work with factories that use safe, ethical, and responsible manufacturing processes. And of course, they use premium fabrics and finishes for that luxury feel in every piece. But you've already heard me rave about my Quince travel pants. Treat yourself this winter without the luxury price tag. Go to quince.com/traveler for 365-day returns plus free shipping on your order. That's QUINCE.com/traveler to get free shipping and 365-day returns. Quince.com/traveler. And thanks to Quince for sponsoring this episode of Amateur Traveler.
Got my bags packed, I'm on a roll. I'm heading out there and I'm ready to go. I'm looking real good in my passport photo. Oh, no.
Amateur Traveler, episode 306. Today, the Amateur Traveler talks about pubs and poets and Vikings as we go to Dublin, Ireland.
Got to sit in one more cafe. I know that I should be heading home, but maybe not today.
Welcome to the Amateur Traveler. I'm your host, Chris Christensen. Before we get into this week's interview, I do have two news stories for you. In the first one, 30 Rock star Alec Baldwin learned he's not quite as important as he may have thought he was. He was kicked off a plane for not turning off his cell phone when he was requested to by the flight attendant. Repeatedly, one would assume. They took a 1-hour delay. He was apparently not even on a call. He was playing Words with Friends. And they were at the gate. They were not moving. The flight was delayed. He later tweeted from a 3 o'clock American flight, the flight attendants already look smarter. A federal aviation official told the Los Angeles Times that if American Airlines chooses to file a complaint, there could be an investigation and he could be fined. And then speaking of people doing stupid things, there's a hubbub because a girl was stopped because she had a gun-themed purse by the TSA and missed her flight. I'm going to side with the TSA on this one. Don't be stupid. Don't bring a gun-themed purse through the checkpoint. Don't wear your ironic Mad Bomber t-shirt. For links to both of those stories, check out the show notes at amateurtraveler.com. I'd like to welcome to the show Colm Hanratty, who's come to us from hostelworld.com, where he is the editor, and come to talk to us about Dublin, Ireland. Colm, welcome to the show.
Thanks very much.
Now, you may guess from hearing Colm talk that you're from Ireland.
I certainly am, yeah. I'm from a town about 40 kilometres north of Dublin called Drogheda. It's actually the biggest town in the country, but I've been living, working and studying in Dublin for the last 17 years, so know the place fairly well.
Excellent. And why should someone travel to Dublin?
First of all, they should travel to Dublin because it's the gateway to Ireland. If anybody's flying into Ireland, chances are they're going to fly into Dublin. So obviously there's the rest of the country to see. But obviously we're talking about Dublin today. It's a very welcoming city. It's a lovely compact city. You can see the main sites and the kind of more off the beaten track sites in around 3 days. There's great nightlife, as I'm sure as everybody knows, because Ireland's famous for its pubs. There's good shopping. The restaurant scene is good. It's just a lovely city, and I think its size is a big plus point for it. And as I said, the people are very welcoming. So whether it's a weekend or just a midweek break, 3 days in Dublin will be 3 days well spent.
Excellent. And now you mentioned the sites can be seen in 3 days. What sites would you recommend that we see while we go to Dublin?
The main attraction, like I suppose the Eiffel Tower of Dublin, is a place called the Guinness Storehouse. Funny enough, our Eiffel Tower is about alcohol. We try to go away from the old stereotype that all us Irish people are just a big bunch of drunks. But it's a fantastic museum. It really is world class. It's about 7 stories, and it just kind of follows the story of Guinness from the history of the company being set up itself by Arthur Guinness, and then it shows how it's made. It shows what's going into the tasting of it. Guinness has got some very famous ads, and there's a whole floor dedicated to marketing, and you can choose these famous ads from the 1990s that you might have forgotten about. And then it ends up in what's called the Gravity Bar at the top of the building, and this overlooks the whole city. It's 360-degree views, glass panels all around, and you get a pint of Guinness included with your admission fee. And it's a fantastic way to end a fantastic attraction. So I suppose the real must-see is the Guinness Storehouse. It's just a brilliant thing to do.
Okay.
And then other than that, a great way to go around the city. There's they have these in a lot of different cities. I know in Boston it's called the Boston Duck Tour,
right.
But in Dublin it's called the Viking Splash Tour. And it's the same thing. It drives around the city. The drivers, every now and then, they make you kind of shout to people on the street. After he tells you everyone to look to the left and go "Rawr," because they're all wearing these Viking helmets. It's a bit of fun. It's a bit silly, and it drives into Dublin's canal as well. And that's a good way to see the city as well.
Well, and you mentioned the Viking tour. I'm not sure that everyone thinks of Dublin as a Viking city.
No, exactly. Yeah, but no, the connection is there, so it is. Actually, where you'll actually go and see the whole history of the city, this is where you'd learn the Viking connection, is another attraction called Dublinia, and that's at the city's Christchurch Cathedral. And it just tells the whole history of the city, when it was founded, who founded it, all that. It gives a great insight to the city. And if you go and see that, you kind of feel like you know the city a bit better.
Now, when we talk about the history of Dublin, and I'm a history buff, so it's interesting to me. I think these days you'd say you can't really see Ireland without seeing Dublin, but it used to be that when you were in Dublin, you really weren't in Ireland.
Yeah, well, it depends. Well, if you're looking for the kind of 40 shades of green and like real rural Ireland, you certainly don't get that in Dublin. What you do get in Dublin, though, which is real Ireland, is just the people, you know. If you go into a local pub in Dublin, particularly in the suburbs, you'll just meet local Dublin characters that are they have their own stools at the bars, like barflies really, and they know all the locals, they know the barmen, sitting there drinking their pints of Guinness. So that's real Ireland as such, but the kind of traditionalist thing of donkeys walking down the road and cows and it's quite a rural Ireland that people might think. You don't see that in Dublin. But within only like 20 minutes from the city, you are in areas that are like that, which is another great plus point for the city.
Right, right. Well, I think when I say you weren't really in Ireland, you were in the sort of the center of English occupation of Ireland is really where you were for many years.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
You really had to go beyond the pale, as it were, to encounter the Irish as Irish instead of the Irish as subjects of the English. So, of course, you also have some of the history of that independence there in Dublin as well, of that struggle for independence.
You do, and it's nowhere more evident than another of the city's best-known buildings. It's called the GPO Arcade, and it's on O'Connell Street, which is meant to be the widest street in Europe. But it's the GPO, it's the General Post Office. But during the 1916 Rising, obviously there was a war going on in the city, and if you look at the pillars in front of the building, you can still see the bullet holes from the fighting that went on, like it was almost 100 years ago.
Yeah, and I think of that almost as it wasn't a successful uprising at that point, so it's almost like the Irish Alamo.
Exactly, yeah.
Excellent. So what else, other sites that we should see right in Dublin?
the tourist quarter, so to speak, is a place called Temple Bar, where it's overpriced food, it's overpriced drink, but it's still a nice place to see. Like you'll always get Irish music and every night of the week, and it's an area called Temple Bar. It's smack bang in the city centre. It's all cobble streets, and it is the tourist quarter, and it's very commercialised. But it's still nice to go through, and there's a few pubs there. One very famous one called the Temple Bar, which is on a corner, and people always get their photograph taken of it. So yeah, I suppose if you want to experience real nightlife in Dublin or the kind of restaurant scene, you won't get it in Temple Bar, but still it's worth visiting as well. A great thing to do as well in Dublin is go and see all the different museums and art galleries, because they're all free. Well, all the national ones are free. So the National Museum of Modern Art, which is just outside the city centre, the National Gallery, the National Museum of Archaeology, the National Museum of Natural History, these are all free, and they're all smack bang in the city centre.
Now, you mentioned that that's a little more expensive. You're obviously working with hostelworld.com, often working with people who are staying in hostels. So where are you recommending they go? For instance, people who are more on a budget.
Oh, if you're on a budget, you just go and check out the museums. You just go, like, the National Museum is just in a lovely building off Marion Square. It's got paintings from international artists, but also kind of very famous ones like Jack B. Yeats as well. His work is there. The National Portrait Gallery is in the same building. And then you've got the National Museum of Natural History, which is nicknamed the Dead Zoo because it basically is just lots of skeletons and stuffed animals. So all the museums are kind of free as well. And then it's got some great parks as well. Stephen's Green, obviously not this time of year, but during the summer, Stephen's Green, Marion Square has got a famous statue of Oscar Wilde. Dublin Castle is great to explore. There's lovely gardens up there. So there's lots to do for free in the city as well. Oh, there's a free walking tour as well, which leaves from City Hall. And I think it goes about 11 o'clock every morning. They've got free tours all over Europe, Berlin, Munich, but they've got one in Dublin as well. So I think it's newdublintours.com, I think is probably the site. But so that will bring you around the whole city as well. So there's lots to do for free.
I've really enjoyed this rise of free walking tours in Europe. And you mentioned the one in Berlin, which I've actually been on, where you basically are encouraged to tip at the end. But I think we did a 3-hour walking tour, basically, and we weren't staying in a hostel. We could afford a little more. We tipped very heavily because it was just an awesome tour. It was really wonderful.
The guys know the city inside and out. You're essentially... Because I did one in Berlin, that was the first one I did, and you're kind of walking around with young, almost history teachers that kind of give you a bit of background, and they just make it a bit more entertaining, and the one in Dublin is super as well. But whether you're on a budget or not, people like free things, so it's a great thing to do when you're here.
Right, absolutely. Interesting. Now, actually, one of the other things that I would love to see that you haven't mentioned yet is the Book of Kells.
That's right, yeah. It's in Trinity College. It's a beautiful building. You get to go through the old library there, which really is breathtaking. And, of course, the Book of Kells is such a famous book as well. I've only been there once, and I don't know, I was a bit underawed by the whole thing.
I was going to say you sound underawed. Okay.
Yeah, I don't know what it was. I was more impressed by the actual library than the book itself. Because as a site, it's more the status of the book, because how old it is, and just the detail of which the pages are, because, just the details of the drawings and the scriptures are extremely intricate, but I felt bad. I kind of went and I saw it and I said, it's an old book in a glass case. What's next, and I feel bad for feeling like that, but it was. No, but definitely, I don't know, I'd say if anywhere where you'd see the top 5 attractions in Dublin, the Storehouse will always be there. The Book of Kells is always up there. And the great thing about the Book of Kells as well is that it's in Trinity College, which is actually in the middle of the city centre. So you can walk around the grounds of Trinity College. You can just kind of see student life in action, and then of course you can go and you can visit the Book of Kells as well.
And if for people who aren't aware, Book of Kells, we haven't really described what it is, but it's basically an illustrated Bible, or really a portion of a Bible coming from the monasteries from Ireland. The monasteries that eventually went back and re-Christianized England, back when England had gone pagan again with the invasion of the Saxons. So you mentioned being a little disappointed, and that leads me into a question I usually ask is, what do people recommend that you see, besides the Book of Kells, for instance, that you go, it's not your favorite?
Doesn't rock my boat.
Doesn't rock your boat.
Yeah, exactly. There's only really one. The only one thing that I went and I just afterwards I just didn't enjoy it. It was the Jameson Distillery, which is in a little neighborhood called Smithfield, not far from the city centre. And I'm not a big fan of guided tours. I love going to museums that you can just walk around at your own leisure. If you see a painting or if you see an artifact that you like, you can stop and you can have a look. And if you don't, you can just kind of move on.
Go at your own pace.
Exactly, yeah. But the Jameson Distillery, I did it once and it was a guided tour. So you're kind of walking around, listening to somebody about how they make whiskey, and then you have a tasting at the end. If you're into whiskey, by all means go and do it. And if you're into Irish whiskey, obviously because it's Jameson. But it was the only attraction that I just wasn't for me, really.
So you like the tasting, not so much the tour.
Yeah, well, yeah. And the tasting is tough. Maybe when I get older, I'll be into whiskey. I'm not a big whiskey man at all, but but still, it's nice to go and taste it raw, I suppose.
I've never developed a taste for it, so that would be for someone else, but okay. And then on the flip side, tourists never go there, but they're really missing out.
There's not a place that tourists don't go because it's a small enough city.
Sure.
But I suppose this could apply to any city in the world. What guidebooks don't tell you to do for Dublin is that they don't tell you actually not to do anything. They never say an itinerary that actually doesn't have a Guinness storehouse, it doesn't have a Book of Kells, it doesn't have parks, it doesn't have shopping. The way that you can really appreciate Dublin is just wake up in the morning, get a newspaper, go down and sit in a local cafe, read a newspaper, just watch Dublin life go by, go for a little walk around, have your lunch somewhere, sit down, maybe have a pint in the afternoon. There's great people watching to be done in Dublin. There's a pub called the Bailey, which is in Duke Street, but it's a place where you can just watch life go by. And when you're there, just make sure to put by a day just to do nothing. As I said, wake up, have a coffee, read the papers, have a little walk around, maybe look in the shops and treat yourself to a new pair of jeans or something. Can stop and have lunch, maybe have a little pint in the afternoon in a small quiet kind of local pub. A great one is Keogh's, which is just off Grafton Street, and then go back, I don't know, relax, watch a bit of TV for even an hour, just kind of unwind, have a shower, go back out, have something to eat and a few drinks. That way you're just really at leisure and you're doing what Dublin people do on their Saturdays. And I think that's a thing that any guidebook which I've seen for Dublin kind of in the middle of all that would be go to the National Gallery or go to the Guinness Storehouse. Just have a day just to do nothing and really like a Dubliner.
Okay. Best time of the year to do that? What's your favorite time of the year in Dublin?
My favourite time of the year is either May or September, kind of end of April, beginning of May.
Shoulder season, okay.
Exactly, and it mainly just because the weather, like our summers are just awful, like June and July, or like if we have, and this is the gospel truth, if we have a day which is up in like the 80s or Celsius, so about 25 degrees, which I know is about 85, maybe 90, I think, I'm not too sure, but generally it will be front page news, it'll be like quite a scorcher, and like it will be in the papers every single year, and there'll be pictures of people down in local beaches and stuff. So, but May or September is just because I always remember that it's when the weather is nicest, and walking around the city in the freezing cold isn't too pleasant. So yeah, I think May or September I think are the best months to visit.
Okay, but then the best single day of the year to be in Dublin?
I suppose that would be, that's the 17th of March, which is St. Patrick's Day.
Ah, okay.
And it's brilliant. Is that the day you're thinking of yourself?
No, I wasn't necessarily thinking of any particular day, but I'm wondering why I wasn't thinking of the 17th of March.
Exactly, yeah, St. Patrick's Day. And it's brilliant because now what happens is it's a 3-day affair now.
Oh, wow.
Not even a 3-day affair.
That's 1 day for the celebration and 2 days for the hangover?
Exactly, yeah. No, it's always the night before, which is the best night. Paddy's Day kind of dies off maybe around 9 o'clock because if it's on a Wednesday, people will have to work on Thursday. So the 6th night out because everybody's off the next day. And then Paddy's Day is great because there's a festival. They kind of have makeshift amusement parks in 2 different areas of the city. They've got Cayleys going on. There's obviously the big parade. And then there's just great fun in all the pubs around the city. So yeah, 17th of March is certainly probably up there with one of the best days to come and visit the city.
And I'm going to have you define something. They have Cayleys going on.
Cayley is traditional Irish dancing.
Okay.
So what they do is they have a stage at Stephen's Green, which is at the top of Grafton Street. They just have a makeshift stage, and they have people doing traditional Irish dancing, traditional Irish music, and with that there'll be somebody with a microphone. It's like an Irish version almost of line dancing, where they'll be up on stage doing their dance, and everyone kind of follows.
And I think of this as a reel or a clogging kind of dance, and not so much Lord of the Dance.
Yeah, no, well, not really. It's just kind of jumping back and forth, like Lord of the Dance without the steroids, I suppose. It's just kind of more relaxed version. It's just jumping back and forth and swapping partners. It's good fun.
Uh-huh. Excellent. Now, you mentioned pubs, and we've actually done two shows in fairly quick succession on Ireland, one on the Ring of Kerry and this one on Dublin. And that's unusual for us to do two so close together, although Ireland is a great place to think about right now because Ireland's problem with economics right now is the tourist gains, so this is a great time to go to Ireland. But the other one we had someone who was talking about they didn't really go to the pubs that much because they were there with their daughter, for instance. They were there as a family. So their perception was that the pub's more a place you go when you're there with your hostel buddies than when you go as a family.
Gotcha.
What do you think?
I don't know, it depends. The best time to go to a pub is at night time, obviously, because there's going to be a bit more crack there, so to speak. And then, really, it's not a place for kids. So, yeah, no, I'd agree with that now, I have to say.
Now, when you say there's going to be a bit more crack there, we're not talking about the drug at this point.
No, we are certainly not. We're talking about crack, which is spelled C-or-A-I-C. It's in the English language. We just use it as good fun. It just means good banter, and you'll get them in different pubs around the city. I'll just give you a couple of pubs which you should really watch out for. There's one called Keogh's, as I said, which I'm pretty sure it's on St. Anne Street, and like it's famous, and riders used to go there in the past, and it's got an old as a preservation order upstairs. It's just like somebody's house. They haven't touched a thing. Well, they haven't touched the place because they're not able to, basically. But that's a great pub to go to. There's one called the Stag's Head, which is just off Exchequer Street, and that's really famous for its Guinness. If you were to Google now, best pint of Guinness in Dublin, the pub, the Stag's Head, will always pop up. And if you're looking for traditional Irish music, there's a pub called O'Donoghue's on Bagot Street, and go in there most nights of the week and you'll get traditional Irish music.
Okay.
And it's away from the tourist quarter as well.
So the tourists are hanging out at some other pub that's looking more traditional, but where the locals don't go.
Exactly, yeah, that's in Temple Bar. And we're just, like every drink, a pint of Guinness will be €1 more expensive in Temple Bar than it would be in other places. So, and it's just full of tourists, but no, that one, it's just a bit off the kind of tourist trail. A bit more authentic experience, I suppose.
Excellent. And you work for Hostel World, so if I'm going to Dublin and I want to stay in a hostel, I don't know if you can pick just one, but do you have a favorite?
Do I have a favourite? What I'll do is I'll kind of go with the old and the new.
Okay.
So I'll give two. The old is actually the reason in which I actually have a job today, because the guy who started this hostel, he then founded Hostel World, and the name of the hostel is Avalon House. It's in an old listed building. It's outrageously close to Grafton Street, which is the city's #1 shopping street, and it's just the staff are really good, and it's just in a really good location, and it's just a real good traditional hostel, you know. And as I said, the location is brilliant, and it's got a really good cafe with award-winning coffee connected to it. So that's one.
And when you say it's a listed building, I'm going to interrupt here for a second. We're saying it's listed as a historic site.
Exactly, yeah. So they need to contact the kind of council if they want to do anything to the building.
Okay.
And it had historical significance with the building. But yeah, that's Avalon House, and that's one hostel. But then there's a new hostel which is after opening in Smithfield, and it's part of a chain of hostels called Generator Hostels.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, they've got one. They're in Berlin. In London is the original one, I think. But then they're after opening one in Venice. But they've got one in Dublin. I was at the opening there just not too long ago, and it's not for. It's basically like it's got everything that a hostel has. Like it's got common areas and it's got dormitories, but it has like its own bar, big huge bar, and it isn't an old hotel which has been renovated into a hostel. So you're getting like really kind of hotel quality sort of thing, except just at hostel prices. That's the Generator. Yeah, so if there were two hostels in town, it'd be Avalon House and the Generator Hostel.
Now, when I think of the Generator Hostel, I think of something that's going to score very high on, let's say, nightlife and very low on quiet.
Oh, absolutely, yeah, it is. It's a party hostel. There's no doubt about it. Well, it has a bar. It's essentially like it's a nightclub within the place. So, yeah, if somebody's looking to kind of let their hair down before going into the city or staying there for the night, Generator is definitely a good place to go.
Okay. And then if I don't want to stay in a hostel for whatever reason, are there other places you would recommend?
Yeah, there's hotels they're called the D4 hotels. I know that it's a group and they oversee three different hotels. So if you just sort of Google D4 hotels, you'll come across the website. And they have got rooms and it's a 3-star for about €49 once you book a good bit in advance. So in mid-range, yeah, D4 hotels, and they own three different hotels. So Google it, you'll find the website. And then if you really want to treat yourself to kind of something like almost which is kind of high end, there's a hotel called the Dublin Hotel, and that's the kind of coolest hotel in Dublin at the moment. There's another one called the Shelburne Hotel, which is a landmark in its own right, and that's on Stephen's Green. So yeah, mid-range D4 hotels, top end the Dillon Hotel or the Shelburne Hotel to really treat yourself.
Okay. Now, I haven't been to Dublin before, but I've heard about so much about it.
Chris, you're missing out.
I know. I know what crack is. That I could. I know what a Kaylee is. But what's going to surprise me when I get to Dublin?
What's going to surprise you? Probably how easy it is to get around. It's extremely compact. Like, you really can walk from the heart of the city centre on the north side, which is O'Connell Street, and the main kind of shopping street there is Henry Street. And you can walk from there over to the kind of edge of the south side, which is Grafton Street. If you really put your head down, you do it in around 10 minutes. So I think people realise just how easy it is to get around and how close everything is to each other. I think that would be that's a nice surprise, I suppose. Well, another thing that I suppose is to try and, to get out of the city, there are some great suburbs that people should see as well. You've got, on the north side, there's a suburb called Malahide, or there's Howth. These are two kind of popular suburbs on the north side. Malahide is a good place for restaurants. Howth is an old fishing village. And then on the south side, you've got Dunleary and Dalkey, and they're two nice villages to visit on the other side as well. So if people have the time and they want to get out of the city centre, they should go and visit those places. And then they'll have a nice surprise, because they'll kind of probably see a side, they'll have a small town experience or a village experience within a big city. That would be a nice surprise, I presume.
And is that someplace I can just hop on a train to get to? I'm assuming I'm not renting a car to go to Dublin.
No, not at all. No, traffic, I have to go through it every evening, is an absolute nightmare. I can tell you that now from experience. No, to get to these suburbs, the one, Malahide and Howth, you can get them, you get the DART, which starts a green kind of light rail system. It's Dublin Area Rapid Transit, I think. And then on the north side, the DART serves both Malahide and Howth. On the south side, it serves Dunleary and Dalkey as well. And you can get them from stations within the city centre.
Is there one local that you think of as the quintessential Dubliner?
A person, you mean?
Yep.
I'll probably be shot for saying this, but it could be Bono, you know? I think Bono overseas is probably... Because here, I think he gets a lot of bad press. Here, a lot of people don't like him. I do like him. I think he's a great performer. I'm a big U2 fan. I think if you have that much power, you might as well try and put it to good use, because a lot of people would be like, oh, listen, rock musicians, just stick to the music, leave the politics out of it. But there's a few. Bono's an extremely well-known Dubliner. Colin Farrell is a really well-known Dubliner. Bob Geldof is another well-known Dubliner. And then, I suppose, in the past, you've got like a lot of poets and writers as well, like W.B. Yeats, people like this who've kind of made, well, he's famous for Sligo as well, but these are people in the past who also put Dublin on the map. So if there was one person, yeah, I don't know, it'd be tough, but I think worldwide the most famous Dubliner is Bono.
Okay, excellent.
Living anyway.
One thing that makes you laugh and say only in Dublin?
Oh, just the people and the sense of humour. Really and truly, that is just, without a shadow of a doubt, it is just, you go in and if you try and find a kind of more local pub and just sit down and just listen to the kind of banter that goes on between people, the Irish sense of humour is just, it's kind of smart Alekish sort of thing. It's a bit kind of, we don't only like to make fun of ourselves, we like to make fun of each other as well. And you'll hear very short, quick humour, and that really is something that you will only get in Dublin.
And what is an example of an Irish put down?
Oh, an Irish put down. I don't know. I'll take an example of one I read there recently, because I think there's a website called Overheard in Dublin, I'm pretty sure. And if you looked at it, you'll see millions of them. But one of them it's these two guys, they're in a bathroom and they're waiting to use a toilet, but there's a cubicle for the disabled one, like it has a wheelchair sign. And the person using it doesn't happen to be disabled, and they walk out full bodied. And one guy says to the other, he goes, I don't believe it, it's a bleeding miracle. Because he walks out full bodied. So that's one example anyway, and that was my attempt at a Dublin accent. But yeah, if you just try and go in and just, as I said, put by an hour or two to try and maybe meet a local or just kind of hear the banter going on.
Excellent. As we go to wind this down, is there anything else that you think that people really need to know before they go to Dublin?
I suppose within the city centre itself, there's so much to see, and it's so small that you could see a lot of it's, if you really kind of put your head down and just go, I'm just going to sightsee. I want to go and see the Book of Kells, the Guinness Storehouse, and some museums. You could do that. You could cover an awful lot in 2 days. Then if you had another day, maybe kind of go and, as I said, maybe check out these different suburbs. But then if you had another day, there's 2 wonderful day trips which you should do. One is going north of Dublin to a place called Newgrange.
Okay.
And this is an old kind of tomb which is 5,000 years old. It's older than the pyramids, older than Stonehenge. And it's an old tomb that was kind of aligned with the winter solstice. So every December 21st it lights up. And that's near my hometown, which is Drogheda. And this is where you'll kind of see real local life. So a good day trip would be to kind of go to Newgrange, go on into Drogheda afterwards, have something to eat and a few drinks there, and go back to Dublin. That would be a good day trip north of the city centre, which would also mean an overnight. And then south of Dublin, there's a place called Glendalough. And I'm actually doing a blog post for Hostelworld soon called 10 Places Which Blew Me Away around the whole world. And like your Cape Towns or Table Mountains, etc. But the one which I stuck in from Ireland is called Glendalough. And I've just been down at this place numerous times, and every single time I get to it, it just takes my breath away. It's 2 lakes. Well, there's loads of hikes which you can do and walks and trails and waterfalls, but the main attraction is just a lake which has this beautiful view looking down of these mountains. And as I said, it takes my breath away every single time. It just makes me love the fact that I'm only an hour and a half drives away from it. So if somebody's visiting Dublin and they have the time, they should do one of those 2 day trips, or even do both of them.
Excellent. Excellent. Last 3 questions.
Yeah.
You're standing at the most beautiful spot in Dublin. Where are you standing and what are you looking at?
Well, I think I'm standing on the top of Grafton Street, looking down Grafton Street in the summer with the sun shining, because there's just a lovely buzz in Dublin in the summer. Like now it's nice around Christmas, but just I love walking down Grafton Street in the summer when the sun's shining. There's just a nice sense of, I suppose, of happiness in the air, because we don't get sunshine too often. So everyone's really upbeat, everyone's really happy, and that's when I just kind of look down and I just go, I really love this city. I suppose that's it.
Excellent. Finish this thought. You really know you're in Dublin when what?
When you can't stop laughing in a pub after meeting a local. That's when I know you're in Dublin. You go in and somebody calls, like, we're friendly folks, people will just go, oh, whereabouts are you from? And you could be, I'm English, I'm American, I'm Australian, whatever. And then hopefully you should, like, get yourself a pint of Guinness, you'll engage in a bit of a conversation, which will then go into good spirited conversation, aka crack. And that's when you know you're in Dublin.
Excellent. And if you had to summarize Dublin in 3 words, what 3 words would you use?
Welcoming.
Interesting.
Compact, because I think it's a good selling point. And just enjoyable. I think it's a city that you don't feel, I need to go and see this. It's more just kind of walk around and just kind of soak in the city. So there's a nice relaxed pace to it. So it's overall just an extremely, I suppose, your stay in Dublin will be enjoyable.
And I'm sort of getting the idea here that you don't go to see Dublin, you go to experience Dublin, is really what you're saying.
Well, it's a bit of both. If you're coming here for the first time, as I said, you can't miss the Guinness Storehouse. You really need to go and check out 1 or 2 of the galleries. But for me, all my favourite cities in the world are cities where I don't need to go and actually go and visit an attraction. I just need to kind of soak up the culture. But there's a nice atmosphere in Dublin. It doesn't even have to be a pub to go and experience this. As I said, like just Thursday afternoon at lunchtime, you could just grab a coffee and sit outside in a cafe somewhere and just watch life go by. And it's just a nice place to be. And then, as I said, you'll obviously get it in the pubs as well. But I'll definitely put by some time to see attractions. But no, you're right. It is one of the main attractions with Dublin is Dublin itself, if you know what I mean.
Excellent. And Colm, where can people read about and also hear about, since you do a podcast as well, your travels?
If you log on to Hostelworld, so that's www.hostelworld.com, on the homepage there's a link that says guides and info, and if you kind of roll over that, a drop-down menu will appear, and then you'll see a link for videos, you'll see a link for podcast, you'll see a link for free pocket guides, and much, much more sample itineraries. There's lots of content there, and we've got content for cities all over the world, but we've got lots and lots of content for Dublin, so click on that and you'll find it all.
Excellent. Thanks so much for coming on The Amateur Traveler and sharing with us your love of Dublin.
No problem at all, Chris. Thanks for having me.
I only have one announcement here in the news of the community, and that is an annual project that I'm participating in with other travel bloggers called Passports with Purpose. And I'd encourage you to take part. This is a fundraising effort to build a library in Zambia, and we're trying to raise $80,000, and it can be in your benefit also to give because there are prizes. I've got a camera that was donated by Sony. There's also trips donated by G Adventures, hotel stays. For every $10 that you pay, you get basically a raffle ticket for a particular prize. So check that out at passportswithpurpose.org. With that, we're going to wind up this episode of The Amateur Traveler. If you have any questions, feel free to send an email to host@amateurtraveler.com, or better yet, leave a comment on this episode at amateurtraveler.com. You can also follow me on Twitter at Chris2X. And as always, thanks so much for listening.
Got to see one more.